July 4th, 1943. A Tiger tank explodes on a flat road. No enemy fire, no mines. Why? Steel tore open like paper. The turret was blown clear of the hull. 8 men were dead before anyone reached them. The smell of burning propellant hung over the wreckage. The question haunted every survivor and every investigator. What in this magnificent machine turned inward and became a murder weapon? The scene read like sabotage. Flames licked the road, and yet the assault rifle bullet patterns were absent. Sabotage was the first accusation, whispered between frightened crews. Could contaminated fuel do it? A bad batch, improperly mixed, vaporizing in a hot engine? Enemy action seemed impossible. Witnesses were certain no shells had struck the armor. Did a mine detonate under the tracks and set off a sympathetic detonation of the gun ammunition? Each theory had merit, each had witnesses, but none matched the physical evidence. No fragments of anti-tank rounds embedded in the armor. No mine crater. The wound in the tank was internal, not external. The list of suspects narrowed: theft of parts, enemy infiltration, contaminated fuel, combat damage, a fluke. One by one, they were examined and dismissed. The mystery deepened. The investigators kept returning to a single overlooked clue: the way the Tiger carried its own ammunition like a live fuse through the heart of the vehicle. We turned from theory to hardware. I am a forensic engineer. I do not accept stories. I strip wreckage to structure and sequence and ask how metal and matter behaved in the last seconds. The Tiger carried heavy, high-energy rounds for its main gun and many smaller charges for coaxial weapons. Those rounds and their propellant were not innocent ballast. They are chemical energy waiting for a confinement and an ignition source. On the Tiger, the ammunition racks were located along the hull sides and in the turret bustle adjacent to the engine and fuel system. The protective measures that modern crews might expect were inadequate. There were no reliable blow-off panels to vent a pressure spike away from the crew compartment. The propellant charges were effectively a long exposed fuse running beside heat and ignition sources. Imagine a bicycle chain designed for a child's tricycle being fitted to a motorcycle. Under low loads, it spins and carries the rider. Under motorcycle torque, it snaps, throwing the rider into the road. The Tiger's ammunition stowage was a chain not rated for the environment it faced: heat, vibration, and the occasional oil leak. One small breach, one stray spark in the engine compartment, could raise temperatures in the adjacent ammo racks. The propellant would not simply burn. Once it reached an auto-ignition threshold in confined spaces, the physics of pressure and heat changed everything. That was the defect we began to test. The mechanism of failure was deceptively simple and deadly. It began with a small oil or fuel leak from a poorly routed line or a fractured coupling in the engine bay. The Tiger's engine was powerful and ran hot. The exhaust and manifolds sat close to bulkheads shared with ammunition storage. A drip met a hot surface or a shorted electrical connection and flared. The initial fire found insulation and wiring, then spread to the lightweight plating separating the engine and hull racks. Heat transfer through metal and conduction through bolts raised the temperature of nearby propellant charges. Propellant substances used then had relatively low ignition temperatures compared with explosives. Once they began to decompose, they released hot gases and flames into confined pockets of the hull. Pressure built. Without a designated reliable vent, the only release was into the adjacent spaces where the crew sat. The first propellant charge to cook off created a shock. Its casing fragmented, and the force detonated neighboring charges. The sequence cascaded. The main gun's ready rounds in the turret bustle were particularly vulnerable. Arranged nose to tail in a confined tube, a thermal cook-off turned that tube into a directional explosive. The turret ring sealing was overmatched by the pressure, and the turret was blown clean from the hull. Metaphorically, it was like a soda bottle shaken and opened slowly, except here the cap exploded off with all the energy accumulated. A single initially small defect, an oil leak combined with poor separation and no effective blow-off path, was enough to convert the Tiger's ammunition into a catastrophic internal bomb. What happened to the men inside is a study in horror and mechanics. The first sign was heat through the soles of boots, then a shimmer of light through the vision slits. Smoke came next, thin at first, then black and suffocating. Crewmen moved to escape routes. The turret hatches, the bow ports, but the internal pressure wave hit before they could act. The concussion smashed them against the interior surfaces. Those closest to the blast suffered immediate, lethal trauma. Others were thrown, their limbs trapped under twisted gear. Flames chased their path outward, and thick black smoke filled the fighting compartment in seconds. The smell was not like ordinary fire. It was medicinal and acrid, the stench of burning nitrocellulose and cordite, the chemicals used in artillery propellant. It ate eyes, lungs, and the thin light of consciousness. Men clawed at the hatch, at each other, gagging and choking as the fire consumed oxygen and blistered the metal around them. There was no time for calm procedure. There was only panic, heat searing skin, metal bleeding from the intense temperatures, and the sound of the turret tearing away. A final, grotesque punctuation. Reports from survivors read like dream fragments. The bright flash, the impossibility of the turret leaving the hull intact, the sudden absence of sound after the blast, then the moan of burning. Many were found attempting to crawl away, mouths froth with smoke. Some were crushed beneath jammed hatches. Those who reached the outside remembered the inferno that followed, the way twisted metal continued to expel heat and flame like a dying animal. This was not collateral combat damage. It was an internal betrayal by a machine that had been entrusted with men's lives. The defect forced them into a death minute that was both intimate and collective. High Command had to know. Reports filtered back. Unsettling accounts from survivors, recurring patterns of turret separations, and internal explosions. Crews refusing to man certain vehicles. The initial response was bureaucracy and faith in doctrine. Some design concerns were raised, but faced with production demands and operational urgency, the issues were deprioritized. Fixes that would have required reworking ammunition stowage, adding effective blast panels, or rerouting fuel and electrical harnesses were costly in time and materials. Instead, crews were instructed in workarounds, more careful fueling, manual checks, advisor notes to avoid overheating. Those measures could not alter a fundamental design defect. The tragedy was compounded by an institutional blindness, a willingness to accept an unacceptable risk as the price of fielding a formidable weapon. Words like overlooked and expedient were used, and the word that mattered most, fatal, became a statistic. The verdict is grim and clear. This was not a simple mechanical failure, nor was it the cunning of the enemy. It was both design hubris and wartime desperation. A supreme weapon, engineered for armor and punch, carried within it a fatal vulnerability. Ammunition stored too close to ignition sources, insufficient venting, and the absence of a robust, tested failure path for internal fires. That defect, overlooked in the rush to arm formations and win battles, turned the Tiger into a land-borne bomb. It was not incompetence alone, nor sheer necessity alone. It was the brittle mixture of both, engineering brilliance blind to a lethal detail, and command pressure that refused the slow work of correction. The irony is bitter. The very tank meant to dominate the battlefield sometimes defeated itself and slaughtered its own crew. Return to the road on that July morning. The wreckage still tells the story. The turret, a bright, clean axis of destruction, lies apart from the hull. The scorched metal bears the fingerprint of internal overpressure rather than external hits. 8 men are gone. The fatal flaw we uncovered, the adjacency of live rounds and hot systems, the lack of safe venting, the overlooked engineering path for a worst case, closes the loop. What began as a mystery becomes a cautionary tale. In war, as in engineering, a single overlooked defect can turn a marvel into a murderer. If you enjoyed this, tap like and subscribe, it really helps. And drop a quick comment telling us where you're watching from. The United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, or anywhere else in the world. Your reply helps the video reach more people just like you.